that morning?
It was here Wednesday morning. We just got it.
And I heard that it went out at, the email went out at noon, the magazine went out at noon for display, and within 10 to 15 minutes, 77 people claimed that they had looked at the magazine, which is not true. So there's deception out there for some reason, and I think that would have a tendency in my mind to invalidate that survey based on that, because if you've got 70 some people claiming they saw it, and the front desk, I asked the girls there.
Good point.
And they said 3 to 4 people came in and looked at it. That's it.
So it may invalidate that question of whether you saw it. So that's a very good point.
That's my feeling on it.
Okay.
And
good point.
It's unfortunate, but when you have that many at the beginning claiming they looked at the magazine and giving an opinion on which was better, how many more after that did the same thing? So I just don't know if I could trust that.
Okay.
I would actually agree with that. And I went ahead and I looked at the survey myself. And the only thing that I fear, not only with this, but future surveys, is that link is not locked. It's not restricted. If I wanted to go ahead and fill that survey out 10 times and say the same result every time, I believe it could accept that. I don't think there's a...
I think it's a unique ID.
Link.
It's a unique ID.
So I could actually keep going into the link and it'll say submitted. If I open the link back up, I can take it again and submit it again. So I don't know if your system on the back end...
It'll block the IP address. Once it's submitted,
I did it through my phone and it worked, so, but I'll look at it again.
Look
so
at
as
that
long
again.
as we have a plan and that doesn't happen, I'm happy.
I think both of these comments really go to the underlying question, which is, do we want to govern by survey or do we want to govern by discussion, workshop, board meeting, vote? I recognize that we are blessed to have your leadership as a surveyor, a professional surveyor, and Debbie's assistance to do that. That may not always be true. And I worry that we create a precedent in which we say anytime there's something of controversy, our structure is going to be to survey it and then let the survey lead us in what we do. I think we want to be responsive to the community and not ignorant of the community. But we are out there every day. We are transparent, as Vaughn said, and we are open. We're doing all of these board workshops. We're streaming them. We're taping them. And I think at the end of the day, you know, this is the first controversial thing that we've had to deal with as this board. It probably won't be the last. I would hope that we would decide that we can talk it through, we can seek input from the community in a variety of ways. We've got on our list today to talk about the town hall meetings. I think that's a really valuable thing to do. But I really hesitate, particularly on this newspaper issue, to put much weight in the survey results. They're going to come back, they'll be whatever they are. Whether they're in favor or against, they'll just be what they are. It's a 50...
Probably be 50-50.
It's a 51-49 probably is my guess. So, you know, so what? At the end of the day, we've done it. We say, oh, look, it's a 50-50, 51-49. We're still where we were a month ago, and we still have to make a decision about it. And I think that this just goes to point out the flaws in trying to govern by survey.
Agreed. Right.
And there's some timeliness to this too, because there are budget implications on which direction we end up going.
Right.
I think that we at the end of August we make our decision.
We'll make our decision. We'll make our decision and move on.
We take our lumps.
Yeah. Yeah, and I view surveys as input.
Yeah.
Not definitive. It's input, and that's why we always value the numbers and the words, quantitative and qualitative. So we value both. Okay. So.
Tried to take the survey again, it blocked me.
It just went on through my laptop, so it did block as well.
After you did it once, you couldn't do a second time. I can't, we can't go back and do it a second time. Okay.
Thank you.
Can we move on? Website revamping is simply an update. Are things on track? I mean, we have a contract out that was let. Any need for input or discussion?
We have another call with them this week. Right now, we're just determining the private versus public navigation.
So we can,
Okay, so all the minutes and the resident forms and all will stay on private, password protected.
Yeah, so we're working that through. Okay.
Can you just tell us roughly what time frame we're thinking we'll roll this out?
If I had to guess right now, I'm probably thinking somewhere mid-October to November 1st.
Okay. And there will be some, if you will, beta versions that the board can review. And then Kevin and I were doing the lead with you all. So maybe that can predate the beta version.
Once we have them, Patrick or I will.
Okay, so we can make sure the things that, because we threw like 20 or 30 things on the table.
Yep. That'll be fun.
Very good, thank you. Budget planning, just to make sure we're on track and whatever else we need to talk about, Steve, Susan?
We are. I think the feedback we received from you all during the level of service workshop has been our guiding principles moving forward. So I've just received all the data back from the department heads on Friday. Spent some of the weekend compiling numbers and putting things together. So we're having meetings with each one of the department heads separately this week to review and talk a little bit more in detail about the numbers that they were submitted. And we're right on track. We're where we should be at this point in time.
And we have that scheduled for an all-day session.
September 10th.
Okay. And I know that something we talked about either at the last workshop or board meeting and maybe before that, several things that we want to make sure are part of this. One was the idea of digital signage. I know that that had been raised. The idea of professional contracts. And so when we're hiring a consultant, and I think the issue there was hiring a consultant to be a consultant and hiring him or her or that firm to do the services. And then also inclusion of equipment investments. Where can we spend a little more today to save money tomorrow? And I know issues there had been geothermal and irrigation, the ones that come to my mind that we've talked about, at least since the drive around. Mm-hmm. But all that's part of that day's discussion?
It'll be part of the discussion. It probably won't, the really large ticket items won't be part of the operation and maintenance budget conversation, but how we make those fit into capital improvement dollars, because they're going to really push your operating dollars if you start adding all those big ticket items into your budget.
Or to see where they can be, right, when we need to talk about that.
And I had hoped to see something in advance if possible.
Okay. I'll get with you on the side and see what day we can set up before September 10th to
perfect
go over.
Do we have any update on that CJC, that cost sharing agreement?
It's an agenda item on your.
That's item H. You're about 4 items ahead.
Okay.
You want to do that now?
Nope. I was putting them together. That's
we can
fine.
move it.
Clearly, I'm jumping on that one.
All right, so are we okay on budget planning?
We're good. We're good.
Okay, moving item D, planning for town hall session. Just want to make sure we had talked about doing some town hall session, and any further planning or need for discussion?
My opinion is just to make it an open. Let's hear it. Let's not specify one item, but let's hear what the community is saying as a whole.
Talk with the board, or is that what you're?
Maybe more of a formal meet and greet of what the meet and greets were, but more formal, more announced, centralized, whatever the case is.
Open mic.
Open mic.
Open mic, okay.
When, where?
When, where, and how do you frame the advertising?
I'm going to defer to management for this one. I would like to go ahead and do it just like a workshop. Maybe September, I think we only have one workshop going on. Maybe that might be the month.
Because we have an odd board meeting date.
Yeah, maybe that's the month for
That's
it.
a good idea.
That'll be about 6 months in with the new board. We could hear some open and honest feedback.
And we moved the board meeting from our traditional fourth Wednesday to a Monday. So I think there were some scheduling conflicts amongst you all as board members during that month. So we need to look at your calendars and your availability.
Right. I'd like to, because we keep talking about town hall quite often, and
let's do it.
I don't see it.
Let's do it.
Happening yet, so I want to.
Let's do it.
I want to hear. I want to hear from the community.
So we're thinking of September. Would it be an evening type thing? That would be your thought?
Listen, I'm the only one. I will make it work. Everybody will throw a date out there. September, I don't have any travel plans, so.
Once we set a date, then we'll know when the hurricane's going to hit. So
that's exactly it. That's exactly it.
That'll be the last, yeah.
Right around the first week of September, usually. Last week of August, first week of September.
Is hurricane or town hall time?
The hurricane.
Hurricane time.
Right, the threats start coming out.
Do you want to send out a few potential dates and validate that with the board?
Sure, we'll check availability and then we'll get back.
Check availability of space and then float some dates.
My only recommendation would be probably evening. I know
sure.
that's
I think that's probably where you get the
difficult,
biggest
but
turnout.
if you want to hear
do a 5 to 7, 6 to 8 sort of.
Yeah.
But there's no scheduling conflicts from any board members that you all can think of towards the end of September?
There were scheduling conflicts.
There were, that's why we changed it.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's why we manipulated the booking.
No, I'm good.
I think I might have originally been a late September scheduling conflict, and my event has since been canceled, so.
Well, you all will
And
get
I did have something
you all
way
will-
back when, but I don't.
So
know.
both scheduling conflicts for September are canceled.
Okay, so you all will have a more thorough board packet if we are able to keep our meeting at a traditional time frame, and then possibly utilize that September 17th date to do your town hall meeting.
So is what you're just saying, move the September board meeting back to the original date? Is that what you're just saying?
Yeah, it gives us the full amount of time to work through the process.
Which is
to get the board
Wednesday,
packet together.
September 26th. Is that
And then-
okay with everybody? Move it
Yes.
back to the, then why don't we do that?
And we can take information that we may receive on the 17th to help us that day.
Why don't we do the town hall on the 17th and then the board meeting back to the 26th, which means we'll need to update the public calendar.
Yeah, so let's say for now, it's tentative that that's the plan. We'll look into availability, make sure everything works out, and then once it's finalized, we'll post everything.
If we're going to do the town hall, no, I agree, we said we would. So when we do the town hall, we should be pretty decently informed on what's happening with Island Village and with what's happening on the Athletic
We can
Field.
invite Matt
Because
Mead to
people-
pop in.
Because people.
Next update.
They're just obvious questions, you know?
We can formulate the agenda and what we're going to post, because unless you want to just call it open mic and come
Well,
and
we
talk
could say
about any
we'll
issues that
be
you
happy
have,
to-
but
we-
feature a few items that you'll be discussing.
We're happy to do a 2-minute update on these 3 items and talk about anything else that you want.
And if we, this might be something just like the annual meeting. I see the turnout at the annual meeting, and it's more for the fun and the excitement, but there's not a huge amount of information apart from just, oh, this is what we did over the past year, but not taking communication from the community to tell us what we can make happen. So, I mean, if every 6 months we did either the annual meeting, and then the other half of the year we're
That's a good
taking
idea.
information, we're kind of pushing and pulling.
I was going to say, that might not be a bad idea. The annual meeting was early March. If this became the September 6-month
6 months.
equivalent, I think you really got to totally open this up, because we could have it's September. It could be hot as hell, it could be raining and everything like that. We want to open it up for a little bit of food and stuff like we do, a little wine. I mean, if you want to make it an event where people actually come, then you do it at 6:30 or so. Do it 6:30 to 8:30. We
Yeah.
start with maybe a 20 or 25 minutes of briefing on this, and then we'll take questions, we'll
Let's hear it.
mingle, and it'll be a social evening, meet the board.
I don't know about wine at a town.
Every glass,
Yeah, it gets bad enough.
glass of wine
March.
reduces your time to speak by.
Yeah, but we did it at the March event, so I'm saying if you're going to, then it keeps with the spirit of, we did it in March, we did it in September, at least 6 months, every 6 months.
Then it'll be
The
quarterly.
opportunity is there.
Then it'll be
speak up.
quarterly.
So we're going to check availability, and we'll finalize that soon.
Yes.
Island Village, there's actually no update since the last update, except that in the Celebration News for August, we have our article posted. The board saw that ahead of time. The group has met twice, and I think there's no substantive update since what is here. We have not met.
When we had the last meeting, we agreed we wouldn't meet of the small ad hoc group until there was something to talk about, and there just hasn't been. And reality of the matter is, it's July and it's August, and a lot of people are on vacation, et cetera, so we thought this was going to be a slow period.
Yeah, I guess what we wrote in the article was that the road and then the bridge would be the first things happening. We were encouraging Mattamy to do, if you will, a groundbreaking. They said, the groundbreaking for the road, they said typically we don't do groundbreakings unless we have the facility ready to go. That's something they have under advisement. And then the other thing that I think they're starting to think about, which would involve the board discussion, is amenities. What do amenities look like? and I don't know what guidance they have in their contract, but to have some discussion and us have some input about what we would like to see.
But to be perfectly clear, they have not started conversations with TCC, the county, or anybody, because they're still even thinking about it internal to MATME. So they're behind the curve a little bit there.
Right. So there's nothing to talk about with home design, because we've heard absolutely nothing, because it hasn't gone forward.
Did you all discuss the amount they needed for the bonds, for the bridge and the roads that they're asking for?
Not part of our...
That's part of the CDD's.
Yeah, I know, but I know they
agendas.
haven't
Not part of
figured
us.
yet for that.
So it's been cordial, it's been open, and then we put everything that we knew in the Celebration News. We had talked about an every other month article. There's nothing to write. It's an update at this point. So hopefully
Well, we thought
something will happen.
for the September one, that we would talk about the athletic fields and where we're at.
Right.
And then October would go back to MATME.
If there's something new to say. But
If there's not, they got a serious problem.
Any questions? Okay. ARC covenants activity with our, and this was internal to the board and management, on July 24th, there was a management update from Steve, and there was an item in here which was an ARC covenants situation with a resident who has appealed and the board has denied. This is going to mediation now. And I'm seeking your authority to act on behalf of the board in the mediation, which is scheduled for a week from Friday. Maybe you can do a little more update.
The only other thing I'd like to add to that is that this is part of the process. It's mandatory mediation before litigation, and the homeowner is taking it to that next level because their appeal was denied. So it is a mandatory mediation. You have to select a representative from the board. It's typically been the board president, and give them the authority to sign off on the final mediation agreement. In this particular scenario, the board has been consistent throughout the entire process on what they're looking for. So really the only negotiation and room you have to even talk about is the final amount. So if you would appoint Mr. Anderson, or if you feel someone else.
Or if someone else would prefer to go a week from, it is scheduled a week from Friday, and I'm happy to share the opportunity.
I move that we appoint David.
I will second that.
That was easy.
And the alternative.
Oh, the alternative. Can we have some discussion, please? I'm happy to do this. I think it just goes with what I need to be doing.
Well, and just to give you
I'm not happy, but
a picture of what it looks like, their attorney will be there with the homeowner, and then our attorney will be there with us. It'll be myself, Tony, and then David. And the attorneys usually are the ones that go back and forth with the mediator, but we'll have time to ourselves in the room with the attorney to talk about our strategy and what we're going to do.
Who is our attorney in this?
I believe Kiko
Diaz.
Diaz with Larson and Associates will be representing us on
And
this.
is Chico a partner or an associate?
I don't believe he's a partner, but he's been with them and handling our covenants issues since I've been here, so at least 3 years.
So has he been through mediation with you before?
Yes.
And he's actually represented us during the appeal meeting when the homeowner's attorney was here. So he's been part of this process throughout.
do we need to vote on that motion that Vaughn made?
All agreed? Aye.
Doesn't sound like anyone's opposed.
All right, thank you. Moving on, CDD budget process. I put that on the agenda as a quick update. They are in a budget process. I think Vaughn and Jack know more and briefed us, and maybe you can update us. Just
The last I heard at the meeting was that they're trying to not increase the assessment, or the tax, the ad valorem, but that they are over budget and are going to be drawing from the reserve, 20% from their reserves. So a lot of things got the axe that were proposed, from what I understand. So I don't know what their plans are. I'm not sure why they don't go for an increase in ad valorem to cover things that are needed, but their decision so far, from what I've heard, is that they're not going to do that this year. And that's all I know.
Then I would add that there is a meeting tomorrow at 6:30, even though I don't think the budget is on that agenda now. But anybody, just another way to let the community know that there is a meeting tomorrow with the CDD.
I don't think they actually approved their budget until September.
Right.
Yeah, I think it was discussion at the last meeting that it was going to be on the agenda, and it's not.
Historically, does the CDD ever consult formally with CROA about items on the budget that might impact CROA or that they think might be of interest to us?
Not in the history that I've been here, we haven't.
I'm asking because one of the items that's floating around out there is the removal of payment for an Osceola County Sheriff's deputy. And it seems to me that while that's been a CCD expense and seems rightfully in their realm of responsibility, were they to withdraw that and we did not have that particular service, it's pretty likely that most of the concern would be expressed at this level, at CROA level, that we'd hear about it. And I guess my question is, CDD will have to create their own budget and make their own decisions. And while we could go as individual members or individual residents, and I certainly would encourage people to do that unless they're coming to the condo meeting that we're having at the same time here, but that while there could be some conversation in that regard, maybe there's a reason that we should be asking for one of our small and nimble groups, our liaisons, to meet with the CDD to discuss some of these issues and their joint impact. It strikes me as kind of silly that they're out making decisions that we will ultimately have to answer to at this stage. And we don't really have any input at this point.
I mean, I think they have input, resident input at the meetings just as we would. And I know that we've never really consulted them for our budget, but I mean, hopefully we could obviously work together.
Well, I would hope so.
My understanding was that they keep the $3.2 million cap, that there was still room to keep Jerry.
I'm not saying that they won't necessarily. I'm just saying that one of the proposals that's on the table is this one, hypothetically. And I don't want to, I understand that many of you would prefer I'd not even mention this today.
No,
it's a hypothetical that it could happen. But if it did happen, is there anybody on this board that thinks that we wouldn't have a room full of people here rather than at CDD asking us about that, and then having the dissatisfaction of an answer that says that's not our responsibility, and then ultimately the pressure to say, well, why don't you make it your responsibility with the accompanying 90,000 or whatever that amount was that attaches to it. I'm simply asking whether or not we could head off some of this drama by putting together a small working group with CDD, if they would be amenable to that, and if this board would be amenable, where we could say, look, we'd at least like to weigh in as a CROA board informally with you. There are some implications to these decisions, and if you think there are things we're doing at the CROA level that would have implications for you, we'd like to hear about them.
And I'd just like to add a couple pieces of information to help you with your decision here. The meeting tomorrow night for the condos and Comcast will be done by 6:30, so there'll be time for folks, if they want to leave here, to make it to that meeting. There is a thread that's on the website, the forums, where there is some communication and some conversation going back and forth, not with any CDD members in particular, but with residents discussing the sheriff. And I believe one CDD member has sent out kind of an informal email to some residents to garner some feedback from them. So I know the CDD can't meet as more than one person, even if you were to put together a smaller group here. So what you've traditionally done is asked your liaisons at a public CDD meeting to represent the CROA board and offer CROA's opinion on certain items. That is an opportunity.
Maybe we should empower Vaughn to speak for us tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, there's several ways of going this. To appoint a group is fine. And actually, we already have 2 liaisons, you and Jack. We could also get a sense of the board and more formally empower you
I think Debbie is correct. I think that 3.2 includes the sheriff, but there was that proposal that came, or an informal survey that went out saying they're looking maybe even, what about the possibility of cutting another 100,000 out, or 93,000 actually, out of the budget? You'd make it even lower if we got rid of our local deputy. So that was just a question that came out from one member of the board. Is that the way you understand it?
And in case anybody doesn't fully understand how this works, we do fall, because we're not, Celebration is not a municipality, we do fall underneath the jurisdiction in the safety and protection of Osceola County Sheriff's Department. So the development district has, in the past, chosen to pay for a higher level of service, an additional deputy that's dedicated to just the community of Celebration.
Yeah, there's a lot of communities that do that. They actually pay.
Right.
I mean, we're a pretty large community, especially with Highland Village. You're talking, what, 10, 11, how many people are you talking? 11,000 homes, 10,000, 11,000 people maybe, 12,000?
Yeah, I think the
Now.
estimate's up to close to 12,000 people.
12,000 people, and if you don't have your own, I mean, there's towns that big, cities that big.
My opinion, and I'll just say it myself personally, is that we need the sheriff's presence in town. We're big enough, and I think to not have it would be a mistake. It's just inviting other things to happen.
And it's always clear in those contracts, and I've dealt with these contracts before with sheriff's departments to patrol local areas. And typically what's in there is that they remain within the jurisdiction unless they need to back up another officer outside the jurisdiction, and then they do go. But they always do typically then remain inside.
And that's how I understand it works in this situation. Can other board members just voice their opinion if they don't mind?
Absolutely.
Do they agree with what I said? Or
Yeah,
disagree?
I would agree with that.
I agree 100%.
Yeah, I would like to see Vaughn as the official
I would.
CROA representative, if it is the sense of this board, communicate, because that issue is a big issue.
No, I'll be there. I'll be there.
Kevin and Debbie, do you agree or disagree?
I'm sorry?
You agree, disagree? Kevin
Oh,
and Debbie?
I agree 100%.
definitely agree.
Okay.
I mean, it's their budget, so I can't.
No, I
You know,
fully...
And I think what they tried to do was reduce other things so they could keep them, and I think part of the issues was the almost $1 million expense in the hurricane, so I think hopefully they can catch up on some other issues next year. I don't know what their plan is.
Yeah, I think with Vaughn being designated, I mean, you're already a liaison and now more empowered, but I think also the invitation to CDD to more formally, we're happy to talk, we're happy to bounce ideas. We would love to do that and welcome them to this table for their input to our process.
Well, I know we've invited them here to our
Right.
workshops and our board meetings to have a rep come and give us an update, but we've never had that.
Right.
Even since the last time I brought it up at their meeting, no one comes.
And in the two meetings we've had with Island Village, they have had full presence. So we're happy with that.
Good.
But at the larger level, I think to extend that invitation and to say this is what we really think. And if you need a sense of this board, like with your comment about it's a sense of the CROA board that we need law enforcement presence here as it is or more. I mean, just to formally say that if they need that in writing from us to help, so we're not individual homeowners, we are speaking as the board.
Consensus of the board. I'm going to speak on my own behalf, but if that's what everybody feels, I'll bring that up.
And I would, yes, and I would say that forcefully, if that is indeed the sense of the board.
It is.
Okay.
I think we've unanimously said,
Okay.
we'd love you to say the consensus.
We
of
would
the
love
board.
that. Okay. Anything else on that one? CROA canoa allocations. Kevin, we're there.
Just looking for an update.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so I'll give you the information as I understand it. The condos, as we know them now, Water Street, Georgetown, Marisol, Siena, Town Center condos, at one point in time were all apartments. Apartments in the community pay a canoa fee. They are members of the Non-Residential Owners Association, so they pay a fee towards their assessments. Now, their assessments are done, canoa's assessments are done by acreage and not by unit. So they had a lot of acreage revenue that was coming in as apartments. Once those apartments were converted to condos, they lost all of that revenue. And the cost sharing agreement wasn't equitable at that time. So in 2004, the CROA board voted to switch it to a 75-25 split that they felt was more in line with the cost sharing and equitable cost sharing for those expenses.
Has that been reevaluated since Evander and Emerson were added, and Solo, which I know Solo's not receiving any revenue, but
They still pay their CROA fees, their acreage fees, because they're still part of the non-residential owner association. But I don't believe that that cost-sharing agreement has been looked at since 2004. That was the last time that was discussed. I think that what we would find, though, because I do the budget every year, I've done it for the past 4 years, I think that what we would find if we took a deeper look into it, it would probably swing even more, because I think that CROA is covering a larger share of the cost based on the actual amount of time and resources that are utilized towards CROA.
To me,
Sorry, what's the cost of the acreage, just real quick? I think it's pretty low.
$1,170,
Yeah.
somewhere around there. I don't
So it's
think
not, we're not
that's
talking
profit.
like they're spending a ton of money. It's a grand thing.
because to me, the real question is, if you found out that CROA was reaping huge profits every year, then you got something you want to open. If they're
Right.
truly running as a break-even at best, then probably anything you reopen is going to be to our detriment.
Well,
No, I agree.
CROA definitely, they're the same as CROA. It's a break even, there's no profit. In fact, we've had to dip a little bit because of legal expenses over the past 2 years. The amount that were budgeted was surpassed due to the ongoing mediation and now arbitration with Lexham with downtown. So the costs have continued to rise when it comes to the legal fees there.
Now, my biggest thing and the big question that I brought up originally is because I came across this document. This document was not posted online as I feel like it should be. And it was something that I just was surprised about, that it wasn't discussed. I mean, it hasn't been reviewed, it hasn't anything. And I'm just talking fair, okay? I'm not going to go ahead and say anything more. I'm just talking a fair assessment. There's been a lot of growth that CROA has had. And I just have a hard time when I break down the full expenses, because they're only paying 25% of this building usage. Let's just say that the CJC did not exist. They still need to go ahead and have their own management company. They need to have their own office space. Their expenses actually would go up.
And so would yours too. Both
Yes.
would.
But I think theirs would go up a lot higher, because they're only paying 25% of a building as an example. Of course, they don't need all the space, but they need the staff. They're not going to get you for a quarter of the expense. So it's just something that I personally would like to go ahead and start breaking down what, if it didn't exist, what their actual costs would be.
And which
And
document?
really compare apples to oranges.
Which document are you referring to be posted online?
I mean, honestly, I feel like any document that relates to CROA should be out there. This one is specifically the cost-sharing agreement. It was signed.
What year? Which one? Was it the original cost-sharing agreement or the one that's
This
currently
is the
in place?
original, and then I believe an updated that was signed in 2005.
Right.
So it was originally signed by Perry Reeder, who was a TCC employee that represented CROA, that
Right.
represented the residents. It was also signed by himself, that represented the CJC.
Right.
And it was signed by Matthew Kelly, which represented, again, CROA for TCC.
Sure.
So Disney made this decision.
Well, and the community was developer controlled up until 2004.
Yes.
So that makes sense that the developer would sign off as the
And then
president.
2005, that's when Patricia Watson ended up re-signing it along with, is it Shaw? Pamela?
She was
So,
the
yes.
homeowner.
Yes, that was the
board president
representative at that point. Now, the one thing that I did find interesting is that, like you said, it was developer controlled until 2004. This document, when it was originally put out, was good until 2006, and then it could be either canceled or reviewed once a year, and it could be canceled by either party, if that ever came up. So I'd like to go ahead and just see and really break down, is this the best thing for the community at this time?
Well, I would definitely like to ask for direction of
Yeah,
one
and
voice from the
this is
board
with
then
the
for that,
board.
because that will require a lot of extra time and resources to determine that. And right now, we're focused on putting together your budget under the current cost-sharing agreement. So if that's the will of the board, then
It
we'll
might be
take
over
that
the next
direction.
year. I'm not saying it's instant, but it might be something that we need to keep in the back of our heads.
I think we have an underlying structural concern or question about the relationship between CROA and CROA. I think that it's obvious to say that under the current structure, the 3 voting members that come from CROA, 2 voting members from CROA. If CROA were to decide unilaterally that they wanted to change the allocation to make it, 90% CROA, 10% CROA, they could, in all likelihood, force that through just because of the structure of the organization. Now, they've not done that, and I don't have any indication that they're even thinking about that. But it speaks to the fundamental equities involved when you had a developer who was trying to slice and dice control between different entities. The CJC made sense. It was a good tool to have. The question that I think should be asked longer term is whether or not it's still a good tool. Is it still a valuable and valid piece? And I recognize that the argument that we pick up some of the expenses, some of the salaries, some of the items is a powerful one. On the other hand, we give up certain levels of control and autonomy and authority and ability to make decisions best for the residential owners. And so I'm not anxious to ask management to put a lot of resource into this during the budget season, because I think the bigger question is more fundamental and is more structural and may be part of a discussion of charter changes and just general overall re-evaluation of the relationships. We are no longer in a developer community, but we still live under the yoke of that structure, and sometimes it doesn't work very well. And I think this is one of those areas where there's the potential for difficulty. And it's only because Disney has been a benevolent dictator that we haven't gotten, I think, into more crossways. But there's no guarantee of that in the future.
Well, while you're having that discussion, a better question asked may be, instead of completely reworking the cost-sharing agreement, what are the opportunities of just dissolving the joint committee completely? Because while there is the opportunity, that I think that's the way you described it, that these things are possible, the joint committee up to this point has really been a ratifying committee of expenditures that are shared, copy leases, those types of things. So, I mean, you two attended the first meeting, and it was very non-eventful when it came to the action items of what they were voting on. So that may be the better question to ask is it even needed anymore? And is there a way to continue to keep a cost-sharing agreement? Because you all come out on top on that cost-sharing agreement.
Yes and no. I mean, we're chipping in a lot of expense to a water tower that, I mean, I would see that as a CROA property. You know, when you really break down all the expenses, is it actually a head? And I don't know the true answer. But I'm having a hard time seeing that.
Well, and there's no free lunch here. I mean, we gain a benefit, but we give up something for that. We give up some level of autonomy, some level of control, some level of direction.
Through a joint committee structure. And
yeah.
if that was no longer there, then I think that solves what you're identifying as the problem.
So it's just something to think about over the next year.
So with the idea of charter changes, is that something that
I don't even know if it needs to be a
is there
charter
any need?
change. It's
No,
not
but
written into your charter. I think it's simpler than that.
To me, it's not a charter change. What I hear is, okay, let's review the organizational structure, the expense sharing and everything in light of where we're going to be in 2019. It sounds like a big enough project that we probably ought to kick it off in like January as one of the 2019 initiatives.
I think that's fair.
And worst case scenarios, it'll be very educational, which is good.
Okay. So let's move that to December, January, not December, January. And then the last item for a quick update, workshop meeting schedule. Just to take a look at it, I know we've potentially adjusted the meeting for September from the 17th to the 26th. We'll verify that that works.
And it looks like it will work. We'll send confirmation, but I got a text that the availability is there. So
okay. And then for the 17th would be the town hall. But is the workshop schedule still work? So that would be September 10th workshop, September 17th town hall.
I think we updated the workshop to the 11th due to the holiday.
The holiday actually runs through the end of the day on that Tuesday, and there's scheduling conflicts to utilize the room on the 11th, so we just left it on the 10th.
Got it.
So we are back to the 10th.
Yes, and I think that was the invite that we sent out to you all was for the 10th.
I just had it marked as tentative, so I wasn't positive.
And to not confuse residents, if they haven't been paying
Right.
attention during this conversation, it just stayed as the 10th
Got it.
on the regular schedule.
But if you look at, we have posted on the website, October 1 and 15, it's the first and third Mondays of each month, October 1 and 15, November 5 and 19, and December 3rd, just to verify. I think that's, Susan, isn't that what the question?
That is the schedule, yes.
And I just pulled that off the website, just to make sure we're, because I think back when we set this up, we said we'll book them in our own calendars through August, as I recall, or through the summer.
We booked to the end of the year.
Or did we,
We did end the year.
we did? Okay. We would review them at this
Well, I
point.
think originally you did only book workshops through the first couple months, and then we
yeah.
decided to just go ahead and make them.
So they're posted, and we just want to reconfirm that that still works.
Did we want December 3rd or just?
December 3, yeah.
And 17th?
And we did change the December meeting, did we not? Wasn't
And the
that
November meeting. The
November is
November
14th.
board meeting is the,
14th?
I have Monday, the 19th.
Oh, you have,
I have the
I have the
14th.
Okay.
I just took it off the website.
What day do you have, Rachel? That's what I have.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's a workshop. You're right.
November north, we moved it up 1 week, is what we did because of Thanksgiving.
Right.
So we're on the 14th.
That's exactly right, on the 14th.
We have a workshop September 10.
All day.
Yeah,
No, we said, so the board meeting was going to move to the 26th, and on the 17th, where we had the board meeting, we're going to turn that into the town hall.
right.
So I just sent you all an update for the 26th, and the 17th, we just hold that to
We're just going to make sure that works.
It's
It's already
available.
reserved. It's already reserved.
6 to 8 o'clock, like a normal board meeting would be.
I think that would make sense.
Okay, anything else before we move to athletic, recreation fields, concession building?
Just one quick item.
Please.
On the town hall here in September, it's going to be the construct in this room, kind of the same construct we had from Marston. Does everybody agree? Because
That's what I would like to
they're
see.
going to have to plan for that.
I don't know how much, I mean,
Well, can we-
budget-wise, how much you have.
Can we?
Maybe not to that level, yeah.
Do you want to do it like this to where, and we can have, I think the Lifelong Learning Group has a portable microphone that we could possibly hook up, and we could move it around the audience, and we could have the board like this to where you can answer questions. And the annual meeting is more of a presentation format. This is more of an open receiving
It's the
format.
opposite end.
Or
yeah.
we put a podium up there and they can come up to the podium and ask their questions.
You could do that too if you want to have them come up to the front desk. I mean, the portable microphone's handy because it's durable and they can toss it to people.
Portable microphone is nice. Are we going to be streaming it?
Yeah, they won't
And-
be on camera.
Yeah.
Then they just wouldn't be on camera.
But they'd be heard.
You could hear them most likely, yeah. And I don't know if that microphone will work for that, but I'll talk to.
We can repeat.
We have a portable one. That
Would we want, I know that
all three probably.
in the annual meeting, what's been done the last couple of years is taking the 6 goal areas. Do we want to do a brief update on, no, okay. Just asking.
I'd rather listen for this.
But if we talked about 20 minutes at the beginning as
Yeah.
starting.
But
Okay.
if we talk about Island Village and the athletic fields, I mean, realistically, that's going to be 8 to 10 minutes apiece, and 3 or 4 minutes for you to wax poetic. I mean, that'll be 25 minutes.
No, stop. I'll keep it down to 4 paragraphs. Anything, are we at closure there? Ready to move to athletic, recreation fields? Okay.
All right, I'll take us off.
Take it
then.
away.
So throughout this process, we looked at building the restroom and concession buildings on the athletic field complex. We're already well underway with getting towards where we need to be to break ground for the athletic field complex. We're on our last couple permits. The county's approved everything, so we're setting up our pre-construction meeting with the county. We're waiting on one final set of comments from TCC, so all of our permits are moving along nicely. We haven't heard any complications with the Army Corps of Engineers, and even if they do, if it does get dragged out with that permit, we can still begin our construction process to start the road and the site clearing for the rest of the athletic field complex. So the next phase on this was the concession building, and it went out to RFP. And Danny Bumpus is our owner's rep from Bumpus and Associates. He's here this morning, and he can give you a little bit of a background on how the RFP process went and then what our final bids look like. So I'll turn it over to Danny for that.
All right, thanks, Steve. Just to update, just a general synopsis of the building. It's the total air-conditioned square feet is 1,950 square feet with 1,300 square feet of covered area, which is a breezeway between two parts of the building and then covered seating that overlook one of the fields. We've got 2 meeting rooms, each of them 14 by 20 with a folding partition, so you could open up to 20 by 28, which if you're going to ask me, it's about from here to here, this part of the room. So it's a good sized room to be used for the teams, referees, any other athletic function that might require a meeting, and the room can be divided into 2 rooms. We've got men's and women's bathrooms. In the women, there's 4 water closets and 3 lavatories, including the handicap stall. In the men's, there's 3 urinals, 2 water closets, 3 lavatories, including the handicap stall. The concession stand, which there's no cooking, it'd be prepackaged items and popcorn and hot dog and things like that, is 13 feet by 27 feet. So that's 270, like around 400 square feet or so. There's 4 storage areas for equipment, and the clubs, they might need to store some of their equipment. Let's see, we went out to bid on July 3rd. The original bid date was July 24th. We extended it 2 days to July 26th at the request of one of the contractors. We sent it to 6 different contractors, 4 of whom had bid the athletic fields. We got no response from 2, no bid response from 2 others, and we actually received 2 bids. It's in your package, I'm sure. Arnco was low bidder at $624,000, and they are the contractor for the athletic fields, which is really the best thing that could have happened. We really didn't want to have 2 contractors on the same job at the same time. It would have been some coordination issues. Excuse me. McCree was the other bidder. They were at $739,867, so there was about $115,000 raise between the 2. At the time, two things kind of impacted the cost. Number one, Arnco is already on the job, so they have a definite advantage over anyone else that would bid the job because all the superintendent's already there, their job site trailer's already there, a lot of the stuff is already in place. And we were, again, kind of happy they did get it because we didn't really want to have to deal with 2 contractors. McCree bid, they had bid the athletic fields. They also built the dog park, if you remember. I'm fairly certain they bid just to make sure they want you to know that they really want your work when it comes up next. And they did a good job on the dog park. So I was happy we got at least 2 bids. And again, we sent it out to 6 people, got 2 responses. So that's about it in a nutshell. Any questions on that? Or?
And you're required to solicit from 3 different vendors for bids, and you don't have to receive 3 bids. And if they choose not to bid, you've met your requirements.
So you had $115,000 difference in the 2 bids. In your opinion, why? Was it all just efficiencies of being on site, or were there other differences too?
It was probably, well, you never know how they're going to bid. And today's bidding market, it's almost not how much it costs, but how much somebody really wants to do the job. We've had to beg people to bid in the last year or so just on anything. But Arnco did have a decided advantage over McCree on not having to set everything back up. They already had the superintendent, so I'm sure Arnco's superintendent is not going to cost any more to do both projects, so they'll be going simultaneously, so McCree had to add a superintendent. So most of that difference probably is the fact that Arnco was already on the job.
But when they look, I'm sure you looked at 2 of them side by side, and I saw in McCree's, the documentation center around what they said they included, and they said these are items that weren't included.
Right.
Was Arnco consistent, or is there any difference between the two that could come back and bite us?
The only thing I saw that was concerning me was that McCree had a $10,000, let me make sure that, allowance for permitting.
Yeah, it was permitting.
And ARCO has all the permitting in there. Let me just make sure. Most of the stuff is related to site. No security systems. We didn't have a security system anyway. Signage, hazardous material testing, fire alarm, smoke detectors, there's none. Fire sprinklers, there's none. So, I mean, most of the stuff they had, exclusions weren't in the drawings anyway, so it was kind of puzzling why they did that. Water and sewer and utilities, the ARCO, as the site contractor for the athletic fields, is bringing the connections to the building. So I think McCree just wanted to make sure that we knew that he was not responsible for doing that. You know, most of the only thing that was, again, that I saw was the permit allowance. And ARCO has the actual permit allowance in there. I mean, the permit cost in there.
So in a follow-on, with ARCO, they had itemized costs, like metal roofing, $49,000. Was McCree, I mean, were most of those costs pretty much the same?
I did not get a schedule of values from McCree.
Okay, so we didn't, yeah, that's why we didn't see that.
Right. And we got, the ARCO schedule of values came at the end of last week.
Right.
So, hypothetically, let's say we approve ARCO for both, and we're at $4.1 million for just what they're doing.
Okay.
What is their track record on being on record, or what kind of overage time frame things, stuff were you?
I've worked with them for, I don't know, 15 years or so. They built the CDD building and did well on that. There's some challenges in building in Celebration, just to be honest with you. I'll never forget when we started CDD, we had our pre-construction meeting with the site, and you can't burn trees in Celebration. So that was something that the contractor didn't know about at that time, not ARCO, but the site contractor. But he's done well on all our other jobs. We've got, he finished a church of ours last year. We're doing another, actually it's a Taco Bell and some other buildings that he's doing. So we probably have 3 or 4 projects at one time that we're working with him.
They have another one in town.
They're doing the church. They're doing the Presbyterian church.
The addition?
The addition. I'm not heavily involved in that one, so I really can't speak to it.
That's at a standstill. It's had a lot of overruns, from my understanding. Do you know the problems on that?
I don't. I don't.
So it's not necessarily the contractor?
I hate to speculate because I don't really know what the problems are with that one. The CDD, there were really no unusual problems. I mean, there's always going to be something that happens during construction that's puzzling and might impact, but you know, you deal with it and move on.
Danny, they're not, you said you can't burn, and they're not going to bury, are they? Because we need all that land to be buildable.
No,
they're not going to bury stumps or anything.
They have to haul it away.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
We received from Brian and Steve a set of different documents, including a spreadsheet showing differences in estimates and ultimate costs. And in that spreadsheet, the previous estimate was $450,000. Today, the low estimate is $624,000. And just by way of disclaimer, I've known you since your hair was dark in real time, the first time.
I still have hair.
Yeah, and mine too. And I know that I have 100% trust and confidence in you, Danny. But I am really, really surprised at this big a variance between the initial figure and the second figure. Can you help explain why it's so much more?
When was the initial, do we know when that was?
450. So it's about $174,000.
How long ago was that? Because this is
that goes all the way back probably to January. Maybe before he answers your question, why don't I just walk us through the big picture here, and it would help those in the audience and help give you some perspective.
Okay.
This is something that Steve and I put together. So, in Our board meetings, as we went through the course of this year, we've talked about $4.1 million. And to be perfectly frank, 4.1 million is a number I pulled out of thin air and kind of made it into gospel. So how we did that was we had 3.4 million. We had the board, the building had about 450, and if you go back to the January, February approval, that was roughly in the neighborhood of where it was at. And Steve and I and Susan had went back and forth and looked at emails, shared data, and all that type of stuff. Then magically, Steve working with Danny and others, you know, we've got the engineering fees, application fees, et cetera, and contingency became that magic accounting term that always makes things work, a plug. So at 39.5, we got to the $4.1 million. 39.5 is about 1%. So now if you look at where we're at, when we updated this, the 3,392,000 is the real approval numbers that occurred in the January, February. So we just made it actual based upon the January approval. This building, going to your comment, is 174,000 above that. I think in fairness to you, you know, the 450 was before there were even any specs or anything done, so, you know, it was
a guess.
The technical term is it was a wild ass guess. And then the question is it consistent, yes or no? And these things have come in actual, there's no updates. You know, big items like Duke Energy Charge, there's nothing there. County transportation fees, there's no updates. We made a decision to stay with the 1% because to me, and it's the genesis of my question, is I'm curious, is the 42,000, is it good or is it just pure drugs? You know, to be flippant. You know, if that should be 10%, because I'm really looking at it from the perspective of, okay, we had 4.1 million. We've consistently said we have to see this building and then get ready to kind of understand. I had sent a private email to the board. I mean, I don't believe 4.3. I believe we're looking at least 4.4, 4.5 based upon my experience with everything in the real world. And I think, so with this perspective, Danny, we're trying to look at the big picture here and say, okay, this column here, where, based upon your professional opinion, do you think we're kind of laying at today?
I would agree that a 1% contingency at this point is not enough. There's some unknowns there. I mean, Duke Energy charges $80,000. Do you mind know where that came from, or is that?
That was an original estimate working with Mark,
Okay.
from when we did this presentation in February.
And Duke has everything they need now to come up with it.
Just got the stuff on that.
You did? Okay. Okay.
We're getting much closer to having a better understanding
Yes.
of what the real numbers are for those because all the paperwork's been submitted. So.
That being said, I don't know if, I mean, the contingency is just a number that you put in there that you think you're going to have to use later. At this point, I don't know if in the room, do we need to raise the contingency?
Well, I think
or
what
not
we're
raise the
trying to do
contingency?
as a board, I can still remember when the last board, and David was part of that, and a couple others, you know, originally when this project started, this project was going to cost $3.4 million. And I think we're $1 million higher than 3.4, and I think what we're trying to do is figure out, okay, is 4.4 a good number, or could it be 5? You know, it's an interesting question as we watch this thing evolve, and we haven't even broke ground yet. How do we think about the risk and everything that we're doing here, so we can think about we've talked, you've heard us here, we're talking about overall athletic fields being part of a town hall. I don't really want to. The $4.1 million I've discussed consistently, I can defend where that came from. I don't want to say 4.4 and have it be 4.9 and everybody just say, Kinsel's an idiot. I mean, I'd like to really now sit here and say, realistically, and point estimates are always dangerous, you know, we can have a range, but, you know, where do we think we're at? And, you know, how good do you feel about this? You've certainly, there's a ton of detail here, you've certainly thought it through, but us as a board, because there's the lesson of let's get this project done, it's approved, we're going to move forward in some fashion. But as people talking about a community center and other stuff like that, and we talk about how much reserves we need, we're really trying to educate ourselves.
Well, let's see. Back to Jackson's question. The 450 probably came from me, and it probably was just a guess at the time based on some square footage charges. I'm sure the project crept a little bit from there, adding this and adding that. I mean, the folding partition, I think it was around $10,000. I think it's in that thing, in the estimate. The other is that it's just an unknown process. I mean, there are times in my life where I've been able to estimate a building within 0.5%, but There are other times when you don't know, and especially in today's time and the way this bid was going with just the two bidders. So I've talked
So
with... Oh, go ahead.
just quick interruption. This works out to about $320 a square foot to build. 1,950 square feet,
Well,
$624,000.
You have to add the other 1,300 though, because it's covered.
1,300, okay.
It's under roof. The total is...
So the total square footage is how much?
Is 3,245 square feet.
1,300, okay.
I'm sorry, say it again.
3,245.
So that's at 192.
So at that dollar amount per square foot, is that a reasonable cost for a commercial building in this community?
I think in this community, yes. We're just now getting back with TCC on all the additional and refined details that they want. So, I mean, the building itself is highly detailed, and there's lots of finishes that you wouldn't normally, if we were doing a concession stand for Osceola County, for instance, it'd have been painted concrete block and shingles and we'd be done. But this is not that. This is what's different than that. I had hoped, obviously, that it would be less than $192 a square foot, but I don't see that we have a lot of choices. Rebidding the project won't help. I don't see what we can take out without damaging the whole function of the building at this point. So, yes, it's higher than what I thought it would have been, but I don't see any way to get it down any further.
I think that's a good example of what you were saying, Danny, about that, the elevation, because if you go down Celebration Boulevard, you look at that new McDonald's that's going in, it doesn't look anything like a McDonald's. They got the spires on it. Looks like the other buildings that are down the boulevard. It's all, TCC apparently added a little bit of the cost to this.
Right. And it does. And I'm not slamming TC at all. I think that's what they need to do. But the detail adds cost, and the working in Celebration adds cost, and Arnco's built things in Celebration, so he's comfortable on what it takes. I would have felt really unsure if we had a new bidder that was under Arnco and didn't really have the confidence that he really knew what he was getting into, kind of thing.
Did TCC have input into the CDD building?
Oh yeah, we had.
And they came up with that building?
Well, we designed the building. Well, just to give you an idea, that building was kind of designed after the golf course buildings. When we did the CROA building, we sat for a while going, I don't want to do another golf course building, and we met with Jeffrey Mallon, and he said, well, we'll make it look like the CROA buildings, which of course made perfect sense. So you go around to the parks, and this building looks a lot like the buildings with CROA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you said 1% was not an adequate contingency. What would you recommend?
I mean, and you're getting close, all right? Once we know Duke Energy charges, how about transportation impact fees? Are we close?
That's kind of a max number they're based just on their current rates and acreages. I'm trying to get a hold of Joe Johnson, who says he's had working on it.
Okay, so we don't know what that is yet. I would prefer at this point 5%.
Okay.
And I think within the next month we'll be able to reduce that to a lower amount, only because transportation impact fees can get carried away.
So if we take the 1% to 5%, and your transportation may be a little heavy, you're at my $4.4 million.
Are we? I didn't add it up. Okay.
Well, I'm
So
looking
just
at
did it.
1% is. Oh, you just made the change. Okay. Computers are amazing.
I have one quick question. I brought this up a couple months ago, I think, with the concession stand, because it is foods in Osceola County. Do we have a grease trap? I don't think I noticed it
There's
in
no
there.
grease trap.
Are we going to be confident that they're going to give us a license to operate with food without a grease trap?
Well, that goes, our concession stands licensed through the Department of Agriculture. Does anybody know? I don't think it's the health department. It's the same as the concession stand at the football field, I believe.
Just because that's a big chunk of change. So I just want
It's
to
a
be
service
confident.
window more than anything. It's a non-cooking.
Pre-prepared food.
Osceola is a nightmare when it comes to foods.
Well, it'd be not KUA, Toho? Well,
So it would be, they're the real nightmare, rather.
ECDD. So
So it'd be an ECDD question.
It'd be an ECD,
Sure. Okay.
and I will ask ECD.
If we can follow up on that. Plus, do these numbers up here include the lift station?
The lift station is it's in the site. The lift station is included, not in this.
It's in the
but
ball
the
field
site,
proposal.
Ball field site.
The original.
I thought when the ball fields were approved, the lift station was not in there.
Yeah,
That was
so
specifically,
we had to get a
it was
change order.
specifically excluded when that.
There was something about 60,000.
Yeah, because we didn't know what we were going to do with
Right.
the other buildings.
It
so-
was excluded, so it's not in there. So where, my specific question is the lift station in here, and what is the total? I'd like to have one number that gets the thing done. You know, the roads come all the way back, we got the buildings, we got the bathrooms, we got the athletic fields, we got the LED lights, we got the fences, or is fence, I mean,
Fencing.
but you're getting my point. And if the lift station, I know, was not in January.
Really?
Yes.
I believe you're correct. I think the lift station, because we were uncertain about what was going to happen with the other building, so it was a change order.
Okay.
Right.
And that's
So-
not included in the.
So where's the lift station cost?
3.392.
And what else then might be missing? Because 4,332 at 60, we're at 4.5 million. And I just want to come out to the community, what one last number, with enough of a contingency that if we have an error, we're a little high.
The error would reduce the
Yes.
net cost.
I mean, disagree with me if anybody does on the board, but
No, I
we're not-
I
we're
absolutely
getting a
agree.
one-time reset.
I absolutely agree. I debated whether or not I wanted to go on a complete temper tantrum or not this morning. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to say that systemically, structurally, the previous board made a decision that we now are required to clean up and make it into the kind of property and the kind of place in Celebration that we're all proud of. In 10 years, 15 years hence, nobody's going to remember that it went this much. They're just going to know what the quality of the product is. But this is a hell of a way to run a railroad, and it's a really bad way to run a town. And if we don't start dealing with some of these systemic things, that for one board in their final hours, you're shutting off the lights to commit to something without bathrooms, without lift stations, without a concession building, without really exploring all of the possibilities, because they were in such a hurry to get it done, and then ask a brand-new board, or at least 4 members of a brand-new board, to come in and get up to speed and understand this and make a reasonable, legitimate decision, and then for this board to turn it over to a new board next year and say, now, as it's being done, you make it happen and deal with the death by 1,000 cuts. This is really, really not a good way to operate. And I think if we don't at least acknowledge that and say it, we're not doing our job here. So will we pay for this? Sure we will. Will we take it and do a good job on it? Sure we will. Am I happy about it? Not in the least. Rant over.
Okay, Steve, what have we heard from the county?
All of our permits have been approved.
No,
It's
no, no,
just
I'm talking about following up on our interlocal conversation. I mean,
they did tell us when we met with them it was going to be a few weeks before we heard back from them, so we're getting close to the end of that few week
So we've
time
heard
frame.
nothing.
Nothing, yeah. But you're
So-
talking about interlocal and possible cost share. Yes. So we walked away with them moving forward towards that, but they were supposed to get back to us with the response on a time frame for that.
So we also have our criteria that has been shared with the board about access to the facility.
Correct, yes. And that criteria would be that public purpose of utilization of the facility.
So do we need to vote on that, or is that embedded?
That would be part of the interlocal agreement.
So so once that's, yeah, so that's a draft, and then once they're coming back to us with a brand-new interlocal agreement?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, which nobody has seen yet?
No one has seen it yet.
Okay, so I would hope that that could be on our workshop agenda for 2 weeks from now?
But they're also working on changing an ordinance
Understand.
at the same time. So
They're talking about
doing
changing
it
the ordinance
at the right time.
so that we could qualify for funding.
I think realistically, we can't do an approval before the September. We know they have a new year that starts at October 1. We know they wanted the new ordinance, the interlocal, and the budget allocation to all happen at the same time.
Right.
And we know it's in our interest to make that happen, because if you have a hurricane,
Right.
all bets are off. So I'd love to at least have you send an email and say,
Yep, I will.
hey, how's it going? Because
But as a draft, we want to make sure that our part on the interlocal agreement is finalized so that it's part of their September package, right?
I think what they had told us at that meeting was, once we went over the interlocal with Deputy County Manager, was the fact that not much would really change in the body. It was more in the public purpose, public use and access section. I think most of changing the words from our community center, which now will not have a public use and access, to the fields, and almost a name change.
It would be smart on our behalf if we could disclose public use at the August board meeting, ask the public to give us any feedback so that if we're approving something in September, the public doesn't think we're pulling a fast one with giving them, because it was something that people really cared about, and I'm sure every one of you, it certainly happened to me, that people talk about public use, so I'd like to at least have something that we're floating, probably in the Friday Flash even, or something at some point in time. Okay, this is where we're at with the interlocal. As soon as we have some feedback, this is what public use would look like. It would give us 50%. 50% of this number or some other number, Steve, I think is a question we've got to ask.
Right.
And so that we can sit here and almost lay it out, because if we lay it out for people around the August board meeting, I think September 26th is what we said, but we need time for people to give it back, because this was a hot button, I think.
Well, and just so that we can understand the picture of what that looks like, and we have to get their approval first, I think, before we put it out there, but what has been floated to them is pretty much mirroring what we already have as public purpose within Celebration, because we utilize Osceola County School Board fields with the cost sharing. We pay for the maintenance and operation of those fields. So we would have priority when it comes to the leagues and the stakeholders within the community. We would be booking those fields. CROA would have complete control over booking them. And through the league usage, they already allow public purpose. We don't have any leagues that are Celebration residents only. We wouldn't be able to sustain leagues. We don't have enough kids here for all of our leagues to be able to be sustainable with just Celebration residents. So that's really what we're looking at. And then there was some question on additional sources of funding. If there's tourism dollars involved, what type of chunk do you have to pull out for tourism events that will bring heads to beds and hotels? So that's what we're kind of going back and forth with them on looking at. But it sounded like after our last conversation, they were leaning more towards park impact fees. And I think that the public purpose that's already defined in the community is what we'd be utilizing.
Steve, with these, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
It is very different, though. I mean, it's, the schools have operated the way we have for a long time, but this would be, my understanding would be 50% ownership, so we would have.
No, it would be 100% CROA owned.
100% CROA owned,
yep.
50%
with the change of the ordinance.
50% what?
50% their contribution, is that what we're looking at?
Oh, their contribution would be up to 50%.
There's no ownership.
No ownership. No ownership.
No ownership,
No
no
ownership.
ownership, so they have to change that ordinance.
That's correct.
But we haven't had to have an ordinance change for the school because it came under the school board. So, I mean, it is different. I think if we explain it, it's got to be very thorough, because I don't want to just...
Well, the biggest difference is that with the school, they have the first right for everything. So we have a lot of times where we'll have to change league schedules because they have games that were rescheduled for school purposes. Now, CROA for your athletic fields would have full control over scheduling.
I think how we would explain it to people is we would say, look, with the county making the ordinance change, CROA owns all the property. There is a reimbursement that maybe $2 million, maybe 50%, who knows. The interlocal agreement is pretty vanilla. The real issue is public use, and public use is depending on what gets agreed to. I mean, it may be exactly how it works today, or it may be some differential of it.
I think we're holding Danny.
Well, just one more comment on that, and then we can move on. But
it all ties together.
But I think the perceived fear of Osceola County residents just being able to come walk onto the field whenever they want to, it has not been part of the conversations that we've had, and we've made it very clear through our conversations that we would want full control of booking. And if you're maximizing the booking, there's no opportunities for just non-groups to come walk in and utilize your facility. But I would say that anytime you do not have it booked and you can rent it out at $50, $60 an hour, whatever that number ends up being, That's an opportunity for you to recover some of your costs for your facility, and I don't know why you wouldn't take advantage of it.
It would.
So let's put that on the workshop agenda and probably on the August meeting agenda. So we have 2 hits on it, some time to discuss it more, and then if there's any action item that would be relevant at that point, 3 weeks from now.
And just for budget, what's your estimation on the operations for this and the maintenance for the budget purposes?
It's in multiple GL lines. We have the landscaping line, electricity,
Right,
water, so I don't have an overall number for you yet. I'm still compiling everything that I'm receiving back from the department head, so I don't have an exact number yet, but it's not far away though.
So no guess.
I'm not prepared to give it to you yet.
That may be, would that be ready for the September budget planning workshop?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, good. So just to wrap
It'll be
this.
ready for when I meet with Brian prior to the September.
So in wrapping this up, thank you for your work and your presentation. Just on this and thank you, Steve, for updating this to the full total cost. The action item from the board would be for the building, for this proposal that has come in, this bid, actually 2 bids came in. The recommendation is for this one. Would that be on the August board meeting?
That's what we would like to see, and then we'd like to see the change order for the lift station. And then I'd also like for you to consider a change order to clear out the existing golf course parcel D property that you have so that it can be Bahia grass there and utilized for open space.
Okay, so that'll be 3 separate action items.
Is there any 4th or 5th item, Danny, you're aware of that we need to think about? Or is
Hope
this,
not.
well, no, the whole conversation
me
is kind of
cringe.
set the big picture, so
That's what-
anything
that's-
we're forgetting at all?
Right.
I would check on the grease trap would be the only other thing, just to confirm that we don't need one.
Well, and
That's all
any way you can push to not have one, because I think by having a grease trap now encourages folks to want to
Right.
fry stuff there, and that's not
Well-
the intention of this building.
But it is not. And
And I imagine you'd need fire suppression and everything else at that point too. And that just completely raises the level of service of what we're talking about.
I don't want one. I've dealt with a yogurt shop that I needed to have a grease trap. Yogurt was important. It wasn't made on site.
No, it's the sugar.
It was
it's
for the cleaning side of things,
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah.
Toho's rough. So
Right.
I just don't want a
Right.
$50,000 price.
Sure.
You could put fixed or portable grills out there, right, if people wanted to do cookouts or something?
I think
For
there's
the
a lot of other options and opportunities.
Are we going to move up, with Danny here, are we going to move up to Community Center Planning A? So that, is he going to speak on that?
I don't think so, but
Okay.
should we move that up?
I'd like to ask about the second floor
Why don't we
and
do-
the expanded footprint for this building.
Why don't we do that? So here's what's coming on our last 40 minutes. We have management consultant review process, so we just want to update and dialogue on that. Updating Parks and Facilities Master Plan, just discussion on that process. Community Center Planning, some initial that. CROA committees, Hurricane Plan Review and Halloween Planning, those were 5 minutes just to make sure things are on track. So how do we manage our time? What's going to get not done?
Well, let's just keep going. Let's move up to community center. If
I'd like
that's
to-
okay.
Let's just move up community center and then move on.
If you have some information, you have some information on this building, right, Dan? How it was
I don't have it
constructed?
with me, maybe that's where Steve went, but we've renovated this building 2 or 3 times. The only real opportunity for a second floor without ripping off the roof on either side is to take the center hallway and make a second floor out of that, which can be done. The issues with that is you need an elevator and 2 stairs, so you spend $100,000 right off the bat, and there's not a whole lot of square footage you can pick up. I checked the drawings, and even coming in from here, there's not enough ceiling height to have a second floor up above this. Even though the roof's kind of do that, it's just much lower. So it can be done, but I'm not sure it adds enough square footage to do you good unless you take the roofs off and just, which you could do, I guess. But you'd have to get out of this building for a length of time. But I didn't really look closely at what that would take. It would take a lot, for sure.
In your mind, did you have the whole place going on?
I didn't have any, really. I just, my thought was as an alternative location for the community center, I thought we needed to, as a board, look at all the alternatives. One was the Stetson building, in addition to the corridor, and then also this building, which was brought up by different people, that adding a second floor, what kind of square footage will we get here? I don't know what the square footage would add, how much would add to this.
I don't know.
I think it was 1,600 square feet, I remember
That
seeing.
sounds right. The other option, at the end, the big room at the end is a flat roof. So that could be taken off without nearly as much trouble as this. Because once you do this, you're back to TCC also trying to figure out what this building's going to look like when it's renovated. But taking the roof off that back room, which is probably, 1,500 square feet, I'm kind of guessing.
That's where your money's better spent, if you're going to do that.
And then you could, if you did this on the second floor
Combine.
and that on the second floor, you could combine them, and that would end up with maybe 3,200 square feet. I'm trying to remember what I gave you on putting a second floor in this hallway.
It was around $2 million altogether, I think. when we
But that
looked at
$2
including-
million, I thought, was just for 1,600 square feet. I had never heard about the back.
Maybe it was. Maybe we didn't include the full. You're talking about what would go over the activity room too. Then?
We could, that'd be a little easier to deal with, taking the roof off and adding a second floor without destroying the appearance of the building in the front. And it would be, of course, possible. It has its challenges. And then we really didn't talk about what the space would be used for and if it would be adequate to satisfy the needs.
The numbers that I gave you are in writing in a management report somewhere, though. We'd have to pick it up.
I remember reading them.
Yeah.
How much of the square footage of this space is occupied by CCMC for town hall management? I know it's that entire wing, but
Yeah, it's whatever. So this would be. I'm the wrong person to ask square footage questions. I don't do much fix me up stuff around the house, but it would be everything back there on that side. So we'd have to look at the
It would
plans.
be 25% larger without CJC.
Todd would probably know.
I'm kidding.
off the top of his head.
40, does anybody know? I don't know, 40 by,
No, Todd's right there.
is there probably 4,000 or 5,000 square feet over there?
That's wrong.
Do you know, Tom? I'm sorry.
Not to put you on the spot.
well, the reason that I ask is that if we get to the point where we start to think about doing this as an alternative to a brand new building, one possibility would be to relocate the town center functions to the Stetson building or to space downtown. There's certainly plenty of it, more every day that's vacant. And then asking ourselves, is it more efficient? Is it, if we turned this, if we converted all of this into meeting space, how much square footage does management need to run the town hall? What would we be looking for out in the community? And I think that's one option that if we look at this building, we've got to think about that as a possibility. Maybe the possibility is we enlarge and we keep management here, but maybe there are some functions that could be moved off-site and we can gain back some room. I mean, I still have fond memories, as I'm sure you do, of the library up front, but that's probably Steve's office now. So there's a variety of different things, but I also recall, Danny, in those early years, we talked about the possibility of making this building bigger when we weren't sure what was going to happen with what was then the K-12 school, right? That was it was not an uncommon thought in the early years that this might have to be expanded.
In this, I mean, you could rip off the roofs on both sides,
Yeah.
all right? But at some point, if this building is 15,000 square feet and you double it to 30, parking is going to become an issue. If you just leave this side like it is and then occupy the other side with recreation and meeting rooms, maybe do a second floor here and a second floor back there, I can see that maybe satisfies the needs, but you don't want to do that and spend $2 million and then find out, well, we still need another building somewhere else to really satisfy. So I think it can be done. Kind of back to, I know when we first started talking about the building in the corridor, we kind of made up, let's do a gym, let's do this, let's do that. I don't know that anybody really knows exactly what is needed and what would satisfy the needs. So maybe that comes first.
Yeah.
This is a possibility, and it may or may not satisfy whatever the needs.
So what we've opened up here, and I'm glad we're starting this discussion more formally, is what is it that we want with the community center? We know clearly we need space for many of the community functions. We know that, and our community is growing. And we've opened up now multiple different ways of thinking about it. Rather than just build a new building in the civic corridor, there may be a building, but we don't know what that function might be. This building reformulated in various ways, with or without personnel here. Okay, like what you're talking about, the Stetson facility. So we're 3 viable options. So to me, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
To me, the question is, is designing the process. What process should we have to start that more formal conversation about community center planning?
I thought when we started the conversation a workshop or 2 ago about updating Parks and Facilities Master Plan, we were going to roll the community center, because the community center is in it now. And I thought we were going to make that a priority for early 2019. So really, when I think about 2019 priorities, now I got 3 of them. We've got to update the charter. Parks and Facilities Master Plan should include the whole community center and whatever else the community might want. And let's do the whole legal financial review of, the CJC all the way down. Is it the best for our, really the charter should be done in concert with that review. So those 3 things as priorities are 3 big projects.
Yeah. I agree. Okay.
So
while we might not have a up-to-date needs assessment of what the community is looking for, we get a pretty good general buzz and idea of what's looking for. And I think the theme we see more and more over and over again is multi-generational, multi-use type facilities. The more you can do in a facility to maximize the capacity, the better bang for your buck you're going to get out of a building. So pickleball is a hot topic right now. If you had open space in a building where you could put multiple pickleball courts in, you're solving a lot of problems. You're not playing pickleball in 95-degree humidity in the middle of the summer, and you're never going to get rained out. So there's a lot of opportunities there.
That was the pickleball people tapping into.
Yeah, they were just texting.
God, I'm glad we're wired.
Just as a note, Todd just texted us, I think there's 4,000 square feet across the hall.
Okay, thank you.
Again, wired connectivity.
So with the Parks and Facilities Master Plan, I mean, I know that's a small group from here, but I'm also thinking of engaging the community more large.
No, when we said we were going to update the Parks and Recs Master Plan, we said we were going to go with community structure the way it was originally built with the teams and everything. I think when we discussed it, we said originally there was 50 to 60 people who were involved, and we were going to do the process over again.
And I think part of that was to hire an outside firm to manage it, to utilize a survey and to do another stakeholder meeting.
And we were going to put it in the budget.
Either in the operating budget or look at it as a capital cost. We'll know once we get, but I have reached out, and so if this helps address that bullet also, I have reached out to some other directors in the area to ask them who they've utilized for their facilities master plans, and I have some names of companies that I'm reaching out to get some cost estimates for that.
If we do those 3 things next year, plus just facilitating new board members and all the process, I mean, that'll be a pretty aggressive, active year.
Yes, it would. So is the thinking, so this is part of the updating Parks and Facilities Master Plan. You're talking about looking at the charter and then some legal financial?
To me, there's the charter, there's, and I'm calling it legal structure from CFC down. To me, then you look at what are the legal rules, you look at how the financial allocations work. It's almost like a re-education of the board and the community about the structure, and it is the right structure for this community today. And then I think you update the Parks and Recs Master Plan, which we had talked about using an outside consultant, using a broad group of residents and stuff like that, so that at some point in time, let's say August of next year, we're sitting around on all 3 items, then talking about where the heck are we really as we think about moving forward.
So that does that would encompass the community center planning, because I just want to make
part
sure
of the Parks and Recs Master
we
Plan
want to make sure
today,
that is
updated as part of
active and alive, particularly as this other fee that we saw keeps growing. So any other, just wrapping up those two items, any other discussion on those two? Community center planning, again, we have some data from years ago, and then we have survey data from within the last year about what functions the community might be interested in.
I do have one more question for Danny, if we could. Let's just keep this simple and say it's $4.5 billion. How will the cash actually get paid out? I have no clue. I mean, do we pay an amount on day one, a day halfway through, and at the end? Or how do we think about cash flow?
I was going to say, just give it all to me, and I'll say that. The contractor will submit monthly pay applications for amount completed to date, and then Mark and I will look at it and either confirm it or not confirm it. So you'll pay out whatever it is per month. What's its schedule? 6 months? 8 months?
Will they do draws at different periods?
Just once a month. They'll do it all once a month.
I would find it beneficial as we go through our budgeting process to have an estimate view. I'm not looking to hold your feet to the fire, but if you think it's going to be equal over 12 months, or if you think it's going to be 30, 10, 10, 20, 5, 5, whatever you think it's going to be roughly, because what I'm thinking about here is it'd be nice with this material of amount into the reserve fund to say this is kind of like how we see money's at, this is how we see flows coming out, so that at the end of 2019, we think we're going to have a reserve budget of X, plus we know the county's probably going to, I don't know how the county's going to reimburse to be true, so that's one more piece also, so we can sit here and kind of say where's our reserve budget going and how is it flowing forward.
Now, Danny, correct me if I'm wrong, but the largest chunk for the dog park was at substantial completion. I think that was when the major portion, $300,000+ worth of that.
I'll get with Arnco and then 90 also, because they'll have a schedule and try to get something.
Yeah, and that's a big chunk of the dollars too for that synthetic turf field, and that's the last part of this project going in.
And I don't care what the answer is, just this is kind of our educated guess as to what the answer is going to be.
Okay, I'll get that.
Yeah, I think that helps to see it alongside with what we're bringing in on a monthly basis also.
Okay, anything else on those? Moving to the management consultant review process.
So just real quick,
you can stay or
and Mark, all of that stuff is done already.
You can stay if you want.
I'll stay.
I'm sorry.
Nope, that was it. Just want to make sure that we didn't need to ask these guys for anything else.
I don't think so. We're good.
Jackson, you want to take the lead? You had your meeting.
You recall that the board's one of the strategic objectives was that we begin the process that was called for in the last contract between CROA and CCMC, offering the opportunity to do a comprehensive audit with CCMC's cooperation. So at one of our recent workshops, you asked Brian and I to move forward on this. David had made some initial contacts as to one potential audit group, which came from the University of Central Florida. And we met with David Mitchell. He's an assistant professor from the UCF School of Public Administration. I met along with Steve and Joe Cook from CCMC. David, you were able to join us for a while during that conversation. What we did in this conversation with Professor Mitchell was to try and lay out some of the competing or some of the different narratives around the community and why we thought it was important at this time to have an audit done. We were very broad and very general in our discussion, and then in the Socratic way that all of us that have been trained in law do, I said, now go make something happen. My charge to Professor Mitchell was to come back with a proposal based on what he had heard rather than a specific set of directions from us saying we want this deliverable at this time on this budget. He wrote, I thought, a really terrific response on time, giving us several different options. We have not shared that with all the members of the board yet for a couple of reasons. It's a proposal. Our view was that we needed some additional input from you as a board before we started to go further. But in general, what he came back with was the idea that there were different options and hybrids of those to help us as a board to evaluate the value that we receive from our management company and to make service delivery improvements. In other words, and correct me, Steve, since you're in the meeting, if I'm saying something incorrect, but I made, I think, pretty clear that our purpose here was not a gotcha. It was not a witch hunt of CCMC or a what's wrong with CCMC kind of meeting. That what we were looking for from this audit was, in one part, metrics. We just don't know what metrics we might be using or should be using for various things. What would the typical circumstance be for us? A second was, are we operating to maximum effectiveness and efficiency? Are we getting the things that we think we need or should have? Are we giving the proper inputs to management? Are we getting the proper outputs? How do we make our decisions? How do we move through those kinds of processes, if you will? That we wanted external input detached from the town of Celebration itself to identify, in the broader context, how do other communities deal with the kinds of challenges that you might be facing? We obviously get input from the community, but this is outside input. It struck us that it was good to create a dialogue and a working partnership with UCF, that this would give us access to many of the academic resources. In fact, Professor Mitchell has put together a team of people, some grad students as well as some other professors who might be working on this project. I think that ultimately what he came back with was a proposal that might allow us to audit and come back and end up with tools that would improve the services that we deliver in the community. Just by quick background, Professor Mitchell has a terrific background in city management. He worked in some communities like Kansas City, Kansas. He's also served on an HOA board of directors here in Florida, so I think he's kind of seen both sides of that. And I liked him because he was a debate coach. But outside of all of that, where we are today is that Brian and I met, we went over the report, and I'll let Brian jump in here in just a second. But I think what we want to hear from the board right now is a little more direction now about how you would like to see us proceed with these proposals and this process, what information you would be looking for.
Yeah, if I can jump in. I wasn't at the meeting, I was on a cruise ship and decided not to call in. But when the language went in the last CCMC contract, where I thought we were really focusing was, there was a lot, as we all know, there was a lot of debate pro and con about an RFP last time. And one of the conclusions was, and I think David even championed this to a certain extent, is that there was not adequate documentation as to what is done by CCMC to even allow a adequate request for proposal. And I thought the language was put in, and the real goal here was to make sure that we've got adequate documentation, understanding of what CCMC does and how we function as a community, that if we want to do a RFP, we have the ability to do that. Plus, I think it's just good audit trail for how a $6 million HOA should have in place. So with that as background, and we had the wording, and David jumped in on the wording too, it really became okay, almost clarifying with the board Jackson's thoughts, which clearly reflected what was in the proposal versus what I just said, and what is it we actually think we're trying to achieve with this.
What was your last statement?
And what we're actually trying to achieve with this.
Yeah, just to comment on the context of why we wanted that in the contract. It was so that what we put in the contract is, should the board decide to move with a management review, that they would cooperate. So that's what the language is. I appreciate your background. I would change the word audit, because that flags financial, and I don't think that's our intent. I think the intent, as we put that in there, is look for management efficiencies wherever we can find them, which may be financial, but it may not be financial. Look for management efficiencies, look at the best practices that we can, I think that's what you shared, but it's also so that we have clear documentation so that you or I, if we had the experience, could walk in and prepare the celebration news, run an event. We have written history about procedures, protocols, not from corporate, but how do you implement that locally? That was the intent. So I think that was the major reason for me for not pushing an RFP. I think RFPs are good processes. I think they're very good processes. But I thought that would be devastating to this community at that point in time. That was my view. So now it's really about what can we learn from an outside fresh set of eyes, I think is your point, and how do we do, while we have 92, 93% satisfaction, how do we get even better? How do we be even more lean and mean? To me, that's the broad question. So
what budget impact are we talking here on something like this?
Sure. We were given a number of different options based on the structure, and I would say that probably the most costly of all of these would have been around $15,000 to $20,000. There certainly could be dramatically less than that if we took a narrower scope, but one of the things that I need to check, because this is coming through a university, there's a weird thing about universities having sort of it's like the equivalent of a labor burden they lay on top. I want to make sure that the amounts that have been quoted to us reflect the university's fees as well. I presume that they do, but that would be a major change. Universities typically charge, I think these days, between 45% and 50%.
Yeah.
So it could impact that fee if in fact our numbers don't reflect that, but there's nothing that indicates that.
My guess is, and I like Dave's wording, best practices and documentation. If we did this review, I think we'd have to put $25,000 in the budget, to be honest with you.
Well, you put it in the budget and you may not use it.
You may not use it. They had pieces that were all less than that, but one piece isn't going to do it. And my experience with consultants is that you never just hire a consultant and they give you a perfect product. You always end up with, well, this is,
So to me, there's several questions here. One is, I view this, should we move forward, and it's whether it's with this group or not. So, I view this as we do it. It doesn't mean it all has to be done now. In other words, we may pick off a piece of their proposal and defer Part B or Part C for later, or then that will clarify what we want. So it's not like one management consultant team comes in, writes a report, and we never see them again.
We could make
I'm just thinking out loud. That's one thought.
We could make a decision to do this over 2 years, and almost like, okay, we want to review on best practices and documentation adequacy to be completed by, let's say, April of next year, and then the following year we want a subsequent follow-up. I think we've failed as a board if we can't sit here in 2 years and say we've got adequate documentation to an RFP if we want.
Yeah,
I mean, that makes no sense to me.
Agreed.
Would you have added, I'm sorry.
No, the other thought is a matter of timing. And I am concerned that if we were to agree today and find the money today to do this tomorrow, and we get a report, they said they would turn that around from
8 to 10 weeks.
8 to 10 weeks. And so if we put that out there and we have a report in November, we have a report in January, we're into CROA board elections.
Yeah.
And I'm just concerned, whatever is going to be out there, my suggestion, I like the term April.
I can say, to me, it's budget season. So and we haven't rehearsed this part of the conversation.
No.
Jackson and I discussed it Friday. You weren't there, but I mean, to me, a new board will come on basis next March. 2 or 3 people, depending on whether
it'll be 2 or 3 people.
And they're going to set priorities. So we've already talked about 2 or 3 priorities for the board tonight. I think as part of this process, you could either shoot to have the review done in January and February, which you can talk about how that works for you, or otherwise you got to leave it for the new board. I don't think you can do it during budget season and be fair. with everything else that we're trying to do.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, I think that the reality is that this document could be used as a political football.
Right.
I don't think that's the intent of anybody sitting here. I think,
Absolutely not.
on the other hand, I can speak for myself. I think the other three of you who are elected are certainly smarter and more adept than I, but it has not been fun trying to get up on the learning curve about CROA in a short period of time, and asking new CROA board members to take that on with the items that we've just been talking about is a lot on somebody's plate, in addition to just learning all the ins and outs of this. So if we were to begin the process prior to those board members coming on and then have the first set of results to start to look at, I think that's probably the least inflammatory period of time, and also the best opportunity to give a new board the opportunity to engage and ask questions and then move to the next level, if there is a next level, presumably, of what to do. So bottom line is there's not really ever a good time that I can think of to do this, but I think this mitigates some of the obvious damages if we actually did the work in January and February and prepared for it now over the next couple of months.
Or if we were to agree to do the work, maybe some of their work based on their timing might be November, December, January, February. In other words,
I think once we've got the budget process, right, Brian, I think we want to get it into the budget for 2019.
Right.
And say, all right, we've approved it, and now what do you need from us? How do we start to move forward?
what would be a good timeline for them, should we choose to go with them?
We had set aside 10, I believe, already.
I'm sorry?
We had set aside 10,000, I believe, already. And
There's nothing budgeted for this.
I don't think we have anything budgeted.
Oh, I thought we had.
It was in our, no. it's
Okay,
not-
okay. We were thinking of it, yeah. Okay, so we'd have to do the whole thing.
I appreciate the intro on who these people are. I still don't really know who they are. Do we have access to prior projects that these people have completed, and other companies or businesses, and to see what they've actually done in the past, rather than just going and saying, well, these people work at the UCF, really doesn't tell me what they've done and what their qualifications are.
Yeah, I'll be glad to send out. I'll be glad to send out their qualifications. But I also have to say a caveat that came up during the meeting. We asked that question: what have you done that's like this? And he said, well, truthfully, nothing, because there aren't communities like Celebration that have requested this kind of an evaluation,
Right.
An efficiencies discussion, a best practices conversation. This is a one-off. Now, I'm not saying we couldn't find somebody somewhere else in the country and have the added expense of flying people in and out to do this. I think my sense personally was that I liked their approach. I liked the locale. I liked the fact that they had some balance in this. But the only way I think we're going to find a group that has done previous similar projects is probably to go to CAI. And I'm just going to say up front that I think that's a bad choice. I think that while CAI has a wealth of resources and a wealth of material and information, it is a trade industry organization, and we should not rely on a trade industry organization to inform what we initially asked for as an independent review. But to your point, if we want somebody that has done whatever word we want to use, audit, efficiency, evaluation, etc., I'm reasonably sure we would find them at CAI if we wanted them. But we deliberately did not start there. So that's direction from the board. If the board wants us to go there, that's where we'll go.
You said he had HOA experience. Was that which companies was that with?
He was treasurer of the Cypress Lakes Homeowners Association. So he has sat on an HOA board member, as a board member. He worked in the city manager's offices in Kansas City, Missouri, and Highland Park, Illinois. He's got his MPA and his PhD in public management. He would be the lead of the system. But I will send out the bios of the three members, at least, that they began working with.
Jackson, I think to your point too, from the meeting, you seemed very intrigued and excited about the opportunity to kind of work this crossover from the UCF perspective of public administration in municipalities to private administration and homeowner associations. I think it was an intriguing prospect for them to say, this is a great opportunity for them. And there's no education course. I mean, none of us went to school to work in homeowner association management.
Right. And I also want to say publicly that Steve and Joe were absolutely transparent, helpful, cooperative, no resistance whatsoever. I very much appreciate that. That's the spirit that I would hope that we would be able to undertake this entire process with, because I think at the end of the day, if we can hand to Steve and Susan and their team and say, hey, this would make it better and more direct and more straightforward, that's a good thing. And I don't think anybody should be opposed to that.
Well, I think in the 4 years that I've been here, you've become more municipality-like in the way we've run and operate. I mean, we have recreation program plans, we have facilities master plans. Those are things that come from the public world. So the opportunity to utilize more municipality-like processes, procedures, if it makes the most sense for this community, there's no reason why any of us should be getting in the way of that.
So what's the sense of the, what's the sense at this point of the board? What do you want? What would you need?
I'm comfortable moving forward based on the fact that we haven't really spent any money on any RFP over the last, how long? You know what I mean? So as far as the expense side of it, and I'm also comfortable not going with the CAI individual just for a full vision.
So if this goes in the budget, that's one thing. In terms of moving towards an action item, what would you like or need?
I'd like to see something, some type of plan rather than just going on a meeting. I'd like to see some kind of plan, what they plan to do, rather than just go on their credentials.
So that's the proposal they've submitted.
To see, you know, how do you proceed with this? What are the steps that you do when you come into this process?
No, your question is a fair question. I mean, just to be perfectly clear, Jackson and David had one meeting, I don't know, an hour or two, I don't know how long it was. And
I was there a half hour.
Okay, and then coming back to the board here to say, okay, what is your feedback? I agree with you. And in his proposal, he kind of threw a few things against the wall and, okay, come back and tell us what you're doing. You'd want to see a specific plan with a specific quote, a specific time frame, what we're going to try to achieve, how much it's going to cost, how the funds would be paid out, everything. I mean, that is why we didn't forward something, because it was a little bit too all over the place versus let's have a conversation, talk about what the board thinks, and then we'd have to go back.
Yeah, I just hate to put something in a budget when we don't really even know how they plan on operating, conducting this study.
Well, to have it in the budget and then to work out the details, I think, are different. I mean, we can put it in the budget.
We don't know the cost, right?
Mike, can you come up?
Yeah, the upper.
He said 25 is the.
He said put 25 in.
I would
and that
put 25 in the budget.
Yeah.
And, okay, you're like, well, why 25 versus 250,000? I can tell. Well, because I've seen.
I have that look on my face.
Yes, you did. You're like, Brian, come on. Okay, the reason for 25 is I saw his. I read the proposal. They had different things in there for 10,000, for 12,000, for 15,000. I read them. I kind of said, this one isn't right. This isn't right. With tailoring, this would make kind of sense, but we need to hear the feedback. The feedback today has been good, so I think you could probably get something from them that's going to be between 15 and 20,000, and then I won't believe it. I'll believe it's going to come in at 25 anyway.
Do they know what celebration, how it's set up? I mean, do they understand all the committees and everything?
Yes, actually, I think they do, and we spent a good deal of time talking through that and historically.
I mean, the reporting process and how the committees work.
Well, we sent them org charts. Really, truly understanding the operations. I mean, we just said that learning curve coming in as a new board member. There's no way he has a complete, full understanding of how celebration.
I was just wondering how they came up with a price.
I think there's a certain amount of work that you typically would look at doing.
I've done things like this. You come up with a price. You estimate your hours.
What I would like to be able to do, before Mike speaks, I would like to have direction from the board for Brian and I to meet with Dr. Mitchell to start to narrow this down, do a face-to-face, talk about it a little bit more now based on what we're hearing from you all, and then move to something that he could write that we could share with all of you.
And then build in those specific,
Yes.
What is the plan?
Yes.
Yeah, we need more information.
No, I clearly got that. We could have given you more information today. I'm just not sure that, as Brian says, it wasn't all the right information, and we didn't want to muddy the waters on that.
It gets confusing. Mike?
Quickly, you had discussion earlier, excuse me, you had discussion earlier about the CROA, CJC, the whole structure, and what we've been burdened with from the standpoint of the developer and/or Disney structure that we continue to work with as we move forward. Now you're talking about a best practice in the study possibly here with the homeowner association. I would ask you to maybe think about the word incorporation also. And it'd be a good time to tie this in if you're bringing in this consultant to talk about it. So you're not just trying to fine tune what we have today, you're also holding that up against a completely another structure. As Steve was talking about, we're moving more and more towards a municipality and the size that we're getting and everything else. And if I'm not mistaken, I've heard this someplace, I don't know if it's folklore or not, but I think we're obligated to look at incorporation on a periodic basis with the state. And I think we're coming up on that around 2020 or something.
Why are we obligated? I never heard that.
Yeah.
By statute, you're required to, at least at some point, based on your community size, to put out a referendum. Now, I've heard people say you have to incorporate. That's not true. But you do go out with a referendum.
It's based on population and density.
Yeah.
And we'll have a census in 2020 that I presume will show that we meet those population density requirements under the statutes to have the discussion. But to be clear, it does not say you have to incorporate. It just says that's the point that you're starting.
You have to be deliberate with a discussion.
Right.
So I think, if you're going to do this, you might want to add that to the scope of this effort and think about it, because I think there was a discussion back in the late 2006-07 time period. People who were here, Debbie remembers probably. I remember reading about it because we weren't full-time residents, but there was quite an activity then. And with our growth and with Island Village coming on board, I think if we're looking out over the horizon, this is probably something in terms of scope that should be included. And as long as you're doing this complete review, it'd be a perfect time to pull it together.
Keep an eye towards that. Okay.
Can I elaborate on Mike's comments? It definitely is increasing the scope of what you're asking. It takes away from just best practices, because a lot of the things that you're doing as a homeowner association are increasing the level of service that if you lived in a municipality, that would be handled by the city. Parks and Recreation Department, from an HOA standpoint, would probably go away and it would be part of a city. But you'd still have an HOA here, though. The HOA doesn't dissolve just because you're incorporated. So it's something to consider.
And I know I've been involved in corporations before, new incorporations, and I think we have to be a clear understanding that if we think that we can draw a fine border around Celebration, around our jurisdiction right here, what we have right now, and cut out other parts of the community, I think we're dreaming. Typically, I've seen, and I don't know if it's going to would happen, but they typically make you incorporate other areas in addition to what's in Celebration. So you've got to look at that as well. Do you want these other parts of the unincorporated area to be included in?
If you do that, you must do this.
It's just not drawing a nice little, tight little line around our homes.
And then actually putting the bubble on.
It doesn't work.
Completing the process.
It won't be total circle. Are we at enough closure on this to move to the next step?
With your approval, then we can.
Yeah, we're okay to move? Everyone okay?
Just one question. Are you looking at anything with the county on this? For example, I know we're providing a lot of the services now that the county normally could provide, but is that a piece we're looking at if we're not looking at corporations?
We had not discussed county at all. It seemed out of the scope since we can't do anything to impact that.
And the CDD was even looking at, they were questioning our extra mosquito control because the county does some, and now they're talking about even, is that a cost that they want him to continue with?
Well, it's from several residents' point of view, mosquito control is much better this year than last year. It's made a big, big difference.
That's why you need to go to the CDD budget hearing.
After you go to the condo meeting.
Condo meeting.
I think that the county has stepped up to make sure that their level of service is where it needs to be out here also. But something else to consider, as on Mike's point, do you want to take a look at the whole picture of the dissolving of CJC and those things as part of this also. And then that could be shared. You can share the cost of this overall instead of just absorbing it all through CROA.
Are you suggesting that we might be able to get this efficiency study jointly funded?
Yeah. Because it's in the contract, and the contract isn't just between CROA and CCMC. It's
That's a good question.
That's a very good point.
That's a good question.
I like CJC more every day.
Are we enough closer on this? We're at 11:33. Can we save these next 3 bullets?
Well, can we just talk about one thing briefly? Hurricane. I mean, it's hurricane season. Are we in good shape with hurricane stuff, or is
Yeah,
there
so our scope of services and what we're prepared for a hurricane is to protect your amenities throughout the community. We have a communication piece in place. We have established communication with the EOC from the county level to get you the resources that you need. We have the landscape companies ready to go to get you additional resources. We've reached out and touched base with the foundation, with Thriving in Place, with CDD. All of those groups are ready and have updated and brushed off their plans and are ready to go. So when the alert comes that we're within imminent, I think 96 hours out, we bring everybody together and we start going down the plan on, this is what we're supposed to do at 96 hours. And start collaborating with these other entities in town to make sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to do. Our biggest piece, though, from our standpoint, what we do, we lead to try and get everyone together and get them out moving. And then we, Todd and his guys, get out there and start securing your facilities, your CROA amenities.
Is there something in writing that you could just
We
share
do.
with us?
We have a plan.
Can you shared that with the board last year at this time? Can you share the updated one with the board at this time?
Yeah.
And Steve, did it include the, make sure you guys have all the dumpster contacts, because that was one of the biggest things other than the porch furniture, was just making sure those could get moved and taken care of.
And so there's a difference between us communicating it to residents to tell them to get it done, and you actually, what is it, Jackson, the hard power, soft power? You have no hard power to force them to do this. We do our best to communicate to the residents to get all your stuff off your porch, but you really do not have anything that, in any source of authority, that you can do anything to them if they don't. So I know that it seemed like when a hurricane comes, it's mass hysteria, because the news builds it up to be the biggest thing in the world, and everybody starts freaking out. Last year, we systematically went through the plan to prepare for what possibly could have been the worst storm ever in the Atlantic. Fortunately, it wasn't for us, but there's a couple things that we tweaked based off of what we experienced last year. But again, your scope is limited to what you can actually enforce and make people do.
So did all the board members get this, or was it just me? This was a hurricane guide, 8 pages from some group. Did we all get that? So one of the things that I think is helpful is to have some sort of easy, understandable, this is too long, but a 2-page, one front and one back checklist for residents.
Right. Well,
what can you say to residents?
Osceola County put stuff out.
We should have it on our website today, a 2-page checklist for residents. What you do, get your neighbors' contact information today, because if they're gone tomorrow, who's going to be taking care of their stuff? Do you have permission to go in their home, et cetera, et cetera?
There may be unique things to celebration.
And so that can be adapted. But this I thought was a nice checklist, but it's too long. It's almost too pretty. I mean, nothing wrong with pretty, but it's condense it, make it adaptable to celebration that addresses whether it's dumpsters or neighbors or what you do for your own house. Start stockpiling your water today. Don't go to Publix tomorrow when it's all sold out. But that's what we can do with the residents. That can be sitting on our website. I know JR's had an article. Did you have it in the July Celebration News, perhaps? Yeah.
We posted it on the website June 1st, and the article for community standards was July.
So just a reminder that's what we can do. We can't.
Your posting is get prepared for the hurricane, right?
Correct. And it has the links to Osceola County, the checklist, the CERT, Osceola CERT, the state.
All the best practices of what anybody, whether you live in Celebration or you live in Tampa, the things you should be doing as a homeowner to get prepared for hurricanes.
That's right. Best practices are best practices. But do we have something that is easily downloadable and printable by residents today?
Is it easily pulled? The links.
The Osceola County website is not user-friendly that way.
He's asking for celebration specific, we'd have to make some.
Just adapt something.
We do not have one celebration specific.
It just needs tweaking, minor tweaking.
One of the things that we had to make sure we communicated consistently last year, and we worked with the CDD to do the reverse 911 calls. We don't want folks relying on town hall during an emergency because
that's right.
We're not equipped to be able to handle emergency situations. And the reality here, folks, is if that hurricane was a Category 5 and tore through here and destroyed us, your authority goes away. You're going to have someone from FEMA that's going to come over here and they're going to take charge, and we're all working for them at that point. They already have all their checklists and all their systems in place of what we're supposed to do. So we have to focus on making sure that your amenities are protected to the best of our abilities. Category 5 will probably just wipe most things out, but and then communication, make sure everybody's working together to be prepared with what we can.
And then town hall is closed.
And I think it's the communication. They did, once it closed, they didn't know who to contact or what to do. So if it is to push that to the county, whatever it is. Just
we did. We repeated it over and over again. Do not call. In fact, the reverse 911 call that went out told people, do not call the CDD, do not call town hall. Contact this number from Osceola County for any emergencies.
Right. So just make sure that's front and center on our communications.
Right.
And did they change the SAM location? Or is there something?
We worked with them a little bit to tweak it. I've given them permission to utilize the area where they did last year over by the dog park. It just made more sense for a turnaround. In front of the library was just a nightmare. That's their property.
What I believe is whatever we do right now, no one will pay any attention.
No.
But if there is a Category 5 out there that is in the cone of influence and all of a sudden on Fox News and ABC News, it's coming for Florida, then people will pay attention. It would be nice to have it that we could send out it's not a Friday flash, but it's like a flash to all emails. Okay, here it is. I don't think it'll matter if it's 2 pages or 8 pages. At that point, people will actually read it. And it would be nice to have that document ready to go.
But it's ready to go.
Because people will panic at a certain point when it's big and it's projected for Florida.
That's right.
Yeah, and when we get in that cone of uncertainty, or certainty, whatever they call it, JR, Todd, and myself, their resources pretty much stop day-to-day homeowner association operations, and we move towards hurricane operations.
And I just kudos, they were amazing with that last year, all of them. I mean, everything was secure and done, and record time, so it was very reassuring.
And I think Todd's tweaked the cleanup plan too, to where he can get the highest use facilities open. We had kids out of school, even on a curfew that shouldn't have been out, back in our playgrounds within hours after the storm had moved through. So we had to rapidly move to get them safe so that they could utilize them, and then open pools back up. And the parents were very thankful to have something for their kids to do. After it was a beautiful day the next day. It was a beautiful day the next day.
For us cleaning up our streets. We're at closure. Our next board workshop is 90 minutes. We go from 9:30 to 11 for the board workshop. Then we have 11 to 12 for executive session with the board on personnel. So that's 2 weeks from today.
For the next one, can we just have the committee conversation?
Yes, we'll start with that as number one. Those 2 items will follow up as number 1, and we have, yes. And then there's something else that came, today we talked about the interlocal, so we'll have an update on that for the board workshop in 2 weeks. And whatever else emerges, there'll be some other things that are on future agenda items, and I'll send a note out and get some input about building that agenda. You'll also see a draft September article by tomorrow. Draft September article. Sorry, I have to think that way too. Ready to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. We are adjourned. Thank you.